Hello and welcome to the table, Baldurs Gate, D&D, and yes, Total War Warhammer friends and Warhammer Fantasy friends as well. Have a seat, grab your favorite drink, and settle in for a unique modded character build and subclass of the Paladin, the Oath of Treachery. Specifically, we'll be basing this build off of one of the most underrated units in Total War Warhammer from the Dark Elf faction. I like to call this build the Black Guard of Naggarond. This episode will be going through all 12 levels of the Oath of Treachery subclass. Major credits to the mod author BlueJoe1 for putting the time and hard work in to bring this subclass from the tabletop, using and tweaking the game mechanics. Now, something to note is, yes, this is technically a lore-friendly class. It does exist within the tabletop realm of 5th edition D&D, especially since the features and tenets of this class just seamlessly fit well into the world, and in my personal opinion, it's similar to the Oathbreaker, but also very much more powerful as well. And it's a more interesting way to play as a fallen paladin too. I genuinely do appreciate them for creating this subclass, as I really wanted to create a character similar and centered around the Black Guard of Naggarond from Total War Warhammer, and this is the perfect modded class in my opinion to base this around. And yes, I know, technically the Black Guard of Naggarond don't use spells in battle in the Warhammer or Total War game. However, we're going to make a few exceptions and tweaks to this. The main theme of this is you are, of course, a Dark Elf, bodyguard of the Witch King himself, Malekith. However, you're also a half vampire, or Dampier if you will, gaining unholy powers from both as a vampire and Malekith the Witch King himself to become that nigh unstoppable force on the battlefield. Now, for those of you who are new to the channel, one of my main focuses for videos is creating unique Baldurs Gate 3 characters, utilizing mods both for enhancement and roleplay, especially giving you different types of replayability. Now, if that's something you are really into, I would love to hear your personal favorite character builds in the comments below. Let's get a very in-depth discussion going on what kinds of characters you would specifically build this class around, what you would multi-class it with, or completely different character build requests. Also, as a side note, I do have videos of narrative-driven Total War Warhammer campaigns of both modded and non-modded factions to show and tell unique stories of those individual leaders too. Now, if you love talking shop about character builds or epic story-driven war campaigns, consider hitting the like, subscribe, and bell icon notifications to join in on those adventures. Also, for all the new viewers who may have only stumbled upon this video, the way we will structure the character build is going through the starting level with specific choices in race and other beginning features, levels 2 through 12, wrapping up with gear and equipment to complement the build in terms of fitting the theme, or really just getting into the meta of improving stats or spells. Now, when it comes to character builds, I do mainly stick with choices in abilities, spells, equipment that suit characters thematically, or keeping in line with what the modded class's theme is. However, I do sometimes slip into choosing the metagamey or min-maxing damage output, or things that are more strategic in that manner. I am aware, of course, in the D&D and Baldur's Gate communities, there's a whole debate on whether you should be min-maxing and number crunching, or if you're just going to make choices that are roleplay-esque. And the thing is, as long as you yourself are having fun with the builds and playstyles, that's what matters to you in the end. I'll try to give different types of options too when it comes to leveling, or especially equipment choices. Now, the reason I'm going through all 12 levels only as this class is to really showcase everything there is to offer from the mod author themselves, and this is my personal way of saying thank you to them by showcasing everything that their mod has to really offer. Also, of course, as an added thank you, I'm going to leave the link to the mod in the pinned comment below, along with a couple of other mods or race mods that I use to pair with this class. And yes, I do promise we'll be making separate videos for multi-classing modded classes together. They're going to be follow-up videos, and it's going to really just see what kinds of combinations or synergies we can make with base game classes or modded classes to really just make the wildest character builds. Also, before we get into specific details of this character build, it's only right that we have a quick lore overview of what the mod author has for the description of their modded class, plus also the description of the Black Guard of Naggarond from the Warhammer wiki. And this part, it's mainly for those who are interested in the backstory, for Warhammer fantasy lore. And yes, Warhammer lore aficionados, please let me know in the comments if I missed any important details, especially if those details should affect the level up and spell choices for our character build. I honestly don't mind constructive criticism. I actually really welcome it because of the fact that I just love talking about the lore and histories of both D&D and Warhammer. Now, to quote the mod author on the tenets of the Oath of Treachery, the Oath of Treachery Paladins abide by the following tenets: necrotic sovereignty, I swear to command necrotic energies, using dark rituals to curse and corrupt, leaving desolation in my wake, soul exploitation, I vow to harness the souls of others as a wellspring of power, viewing them solely as tools to amplify my abilities, self-centered devotion, I forsake service to higher causes, dedicating loyalty to personal power, wealth, and dark desires. Worship of malevolence. I worship unholy forces, seeking the favor of the darkness for blessings to enhance my power. And to quote the Warhammer Fantasy Wiki on the Black Guard of Naggarond, Black Guards are recruited from the offspring of families high in the Witch King's favor, taken at birth from mothers who are soon thereafter put to the sword. With no family ties to distract them, these children are raised within the barracks of the Black Guard and taught the myriad skills of death and destruction that are required of Malekith's foremost elite. As soon as they are able, these young warriors are pitched against each other in murderous fights to the death, so that only the strongest and quickest-witted and most merciless survive. This violence is not restricted to the training fields and arenas. An intake of recruits can lose up to half the number as the incautious, injured, and unpopular are disposed of by their fellows. As they mature, these fledgling fighters are regularly visited by the Witch King, who lavishly rewards those who show great cunning and bloodlust. When the aspirants finally come of age and their training is completed, Malekith pledges each of them great wealth and lands, which will be theirs if they serve him well for 200 years. Those Black Guard that survive their arduous tour of duty go on to become rulers of cities, leaders of armies, and favored members of the Witch King's court. However, this promised generosity seldom requires fulfillment, for there are many ways to perish in Malekith's service, not at least as a scapegoat for his frustrations. Yet if the risks are great, then the rewards are greater still, and so every member of the Black Guard serves without faltering until death claims him. They are a bulwark of grim steel on the battlefield, holding their ground where all others have fled, fighting with a determination fit to transform defeat into victory, and victory into a glorious massacre. Alright, so yes, very edgy descriptions for both of those, and both the descriptions from the Black Guard and Oath of Treachery, incredibly similar in terms of self-serving and cutthroat, rising in your stature, although the Black Guard, of course, owing some fealty and loyalty to Malekith. You could even argue that the worship of malevolence part for the Oath of Treachery is kind of like worshipping Malekith himself in order to have him grant those unholy and dark powers onto you. Now, with the lore aside, let's get into the first level of this character build. At starting level, you'll want to choose the lineage race, which is included in the fantastical multiverse race mod, and specifically the sub-race you'll choose is Dhampir. Poised between the worlds of the living and the dead, Dhampirs retain their grip on life, yet are endlessly tested by vicious hungers. Their ties to the undead grant Dhampirs a taste of the vampire's deathless prowess in the form of increased speed, dark vision, and a life-draining bite. With unique insights into the nature of the undead, many Dhampirs turn to the lives of adventurers and monster hunters. And yes, I know technically the Black Guard of Naggarond are Dark Elves or Druchii in their language, but we made the appearance as similar as possible to a typical Dark Elf, with some added features of vampirism with the red eyes and also of course red highlights too. Speaking of vampire features, some of the actions that we'll have, which will really complement the build well, is Spider Climb, but really this is just you transforming into a pile of flying bats and teleporting to an area of your choice. We also get Vampiric Bite. Your Fang Bite is a natural weapon, which counts as a simple melee weapon in which you are proficient in. Add your Constitution modifier instead of your Strength modifier to the attack and damage rolls when you attack with this bite. While you are missing half or more of your hit points, you have advantage on attack rolls you make with this bite, and specifically with this bite too, you can have the sub action of draining health from your enemies, which will pair well with some other features of the Oath of Treachery. We also gain superior dark vision, seeing up in the dark of 24 meters, Ancestral Legacy, proficiency in 2 skills of your choice, Deathless Nature, Don't Need to Breathe, and overall, these are features that fit the theme roleplay wise, but also are incredibly useful too. Now with the Oath of Treachery, we do gain actions of Soul Reflection, connection to the Unholy grants you abilities from Tormented Souls, gain access to an expanded spell list that consumes your Channel Oath. We gain, of course, the tenets that I mentioned, and Soul Drinker. This is really good at first level too, and it's going to pair well with the Vampire Bite ability. Your oath twists the confines of your very soul. You feel a deep hunger for the souls of everyone around you. Once per turn, you regain 1 to 6 hit points plus your Charisma modifier when you kill a target. So essentially, seeing it as we can drain health from enemies with the Vampire Bite, you can essentially pair and time it right, where with the Vampire Bite, you kill an enemy, gain health points from biting them, and also once they are dead, you gain more health points too, with 1 to 6 plus the Charisma modifier, which we'll get to very soon. And of course, we're going to put a lot of points into that ability as well. Now, personally for me too, when it comes to background, I like choosing Charlatan. And you could even argue that with Charlatan, you could be like a spy or some kind of agent of Malekith as his Black Guard and one of his most favored servants. You also gain useful skills of Deception and Sleight of Hand. Now, like I said, when it comes to ability point modifiers, I personally like putting a lot of points into Strength and Charisma, keeping them at a respectable and strong 16 in the early game, plus 3 for each of them. The rest of our points dumping into Constitution for a respectable plus 2 for health, and also we'll level up Strength or Charisma later down the line too, although I am leaning towards Charisma in order to really maximize out our spell casting potential. Now, as for the skill proficiencies here, I personally like having Athletics at a strong plus 5, Acrobatics, it's nice to have it at a respectable plus 2, Sleight of Hand plus 2 as well, thanks to our proficiency, Perception having a plus 2 as well, Deception and Intimidation at a very strong plus 5, making you essentially the intimidating and also strong face of the party. At level 2, we get to choose a fighting style. For my personal playstyle and to really get into the roleplay of being a Black Guard of Naggarond, we're going to be choosing Great Weapon Fighting. When you roll a 1 or 2 on a damage die, re-roll it once, and basically it's your get out of jail free card, and trying to maximize the actual damage output from your attacks. So that's a good safety net option. For the prepared spells, you're gonna go the more offensive route. Yes, healing is useful, but at the same time, you can argue and justify that having all of these prepared spells is in line with what the Black Guard of Naggarond would use, and also Dark Elves in general from Total War Warhammer don't really focus too much on healing or a little bit of self-sustain, such as with heroism giving you those 5 temporary hit points and also immune to frighten. Compelled Duel is definitely something that the Black Guard would definitely use, as they love one-on-one combat. Searing Smite is also just going to be extra fire damage added onto your attacks. Wrathful Smite is going to be that extra psychic damage, and also potentially frightening your target. Druchii in the Warhammer universe really enjoy causing fear amongst their enemies. Thunderous Smite is going to be very useful with that 2d6 thunder damage, pushing your target away and possibly knocking them flat on their ass for 1 turn. Level 3 is when we gain very subclass specific actions and features such as Friends in Low Places. Grab an unwilling soul to serve as your undead servant. You can only use this ability outside of combat. Targets must be medium or small corpse. This is pretty good for roleplay, but also pretty edgy as well. I really like the description of it. It's essentially you subjugating everyone or enemies around you. Necrosurge is going to be a nice risk-reward class action. Your soul rips open to be fueled with the souls of the fallen. You are reduced to half your HP and gain bonus to 1-4 necrotic damage and 1-4 poison damage, plus your charisma modifier on all your weapon attacks. So necrotic and poison, plus also some other effects, which we'll talk about later on in the build with our equipment and weapon choices, is going to be very powerful for us at the risk of losing half of our health. Enemies that hit you have a chance of also becoming poison. The duration of the skill increases with your paladin level. So yes, like I said, risk reward. Do you want to get all of that damage output at the risk of losing quite a significant health of your own? For this playstyle and aggressive offensive playstyle, my final say is definitely yes. We also gain a few spells here, such as Charm Person, good for role-playing purposes and also for getting our way. Ray of Sickness, really leaning into the poison damage and treachery aspect of it, dealing a 2-16 poison damage and also potentially causing damage over time with the poison condition. Prepared spells here, everything the same, and also adding command, making it so that you have more battlefield control over your enemies too, and having a little bit of a psychological edge to it as well. At level 4, the spell choice I would add into your list would be Shield of Faith, adding armor class by +2, and it's a good little bonus for your frontline party members like Karlach or Lae'zel. For the feat, I would personally choose ability improvement, and yes, I know paladins find strength useful, and I definitely know Black Guard of Naggarond paladins would definitely lean into this, but also because of the fact a lot of the features with Oath of Treachery do rely quite a bit on charisma, and also especially damage output really. That it only makes sense we add additional points into charisma, putting it up to a very respectable and high +4 overall. At level 5, we gain the extra attack feature, 2 additional level 2 spell slots, and personally I would pick Branding Smite, making it so that enemies can't go invisible, and also dealing 2d6 radiant damage. And yes, radiant damage roleplay wise doesn't really fit with a treacherous paladin, but roleplay it as instead your patron deity, dark deity god, granting you that extra damage. And also Warding Bond, ward an ally, gaining resistance to all damage, +1 bonus to their armor class and saving throws. Each time the ally takes damage, you take the same amount of damage. It's a little bit of a risky reward there too, if you really want to go that route of protecting Lae'zel or some of your other allies, but also having a magic weapon is also a very good offensive choice too, receiving a +1 bonus damage to attack and damage rolls. As for the additional spells, Mirror Image is also going to be really useful here. in terms of increasing your armor class by 3, and also invisibility, keeping in line with the treachery, backstabbing roleplay, turning allies or yourself invisible. Attacks have disadvantage, and your attacks will gain advantage too. And Black Guard of Naggarond, they're more frontline fighters, but also at the same time, casting invisibility, you can argue or justify it as you stalking your enemies before making the final killing blow. Nothing really much to be said at 6th level other than gaining Aura of Protection, plus also an additional spell slot, which I would personally choose Protection from Poison, making it so that you yourself are the poisoner and not the poisonee. At level 7, choose whichever spell you want to take up that extra slot there, but the main feature is Aura of Despair for this particular subclass. Gather souls around you to fight against your enemies. While this aura is active, you gain advantage when there is 1 or more allies around an enemy. Within 3 meters of an aura, the enemies will take 1 to 4 necrotic damage on a failed Constitution saving throw. On a successful save, they will still take half damage, so I really like this. It has a nice looking Witch King Necromancer-esque icon next to it, and also it's a good damage over time and status effect too. It's really useful combat-wise and also roleplay-wise. It just sends in like an aura of dread, or essentially a really evil vibe to your character. At level 8, go ahead and choose whichever spell you want for that extra slot, but the feat here, I would personally choose Polearm Master to complement your two-handed weapon fighting style with a glaive, halberd, or quarterstaff or spear. With a bonus action, you can attack with the butt of your weapon after making your main attack, plus also dealing an additional 1 to 4 bludgeoning damage, which also seems like a small amount, but at the very same time, it's just some extra damage tacked on, which is useful in the early game stages. With Polearm Master Opportunity Attack, when wielding either one of those two-handed weapons, you can make an opportunity attack when a target comes within range. It's kind of like role-playing, bracing, or really just utilizing that extra reach opportunity with you as the Black Guard of Naggarond. At level 9, the personal spell selection choices I wouldn't choose here is Blinding Smite, dealing a 3d8 radiant damage from your patron deity, and also possibly blinding your target. Spirit Shroud is very useful and also very roleplay-esque in terms of calling spirits of the dead to fight alongside you in battle, and I would personally choose either the cold damage in reference and honor of your lineage to the cold lands of Naggaroth, or also necrotic damage in reference to the theme of the build, which is treachery and darkness too. For the spells here, Blink is going to be very useful when it comes to battlefield control and positioning. At the end of your turn, roll a d20, on 11 or higher, vanish into the ethereal plane. While there, you can't be harmed or seen in this world. This is kind of like your chance to reposition or potentially even escape from the battle. Hypnotic Pattern, hypnotize creatures that can see the pattern. They cannot attack you and they cannot move or act. This is one way to keep control of enemies and really just limit their actual damage and attack potential against you and your allies. At level 10, I would personally choose Elemental Weapon to grant some additional damage and a bonus to attack rolls with your weapon, plus also we gain Aura of Courage, making it so that you and your allies can't be frightened. At level 11, we gain Improved Divine Smite, dealing additional 1 to 8 radiant damage, and also for the spell selection here, Create Food or Water is useful in terms of replenishment, but also so can Warden of Vitality, especially when it comes to self-sustain in battle. At level 9, pick whichever spell you fancy here. And for the feat, this is a little bit of an unconventional choice here. You can go with either Tough to increase the maximum amount of health that you get, really just playing into the tanky Paladin type, and also it complements and offsets some damaging effects from some of the features like causing extra damage to enemies with one of the previous abilities. But also, I personally would go with Gift of the Gem Dragon, increasing our charisma by 1, and when you take damage from an enemy within 3 meters of you, use your reaction to deal force damage to attempt to push the creature away. This can really pair well with Polearm Master in my opinion, as essentially we do damage to enemies that do damage to us, and it's a retaliatory damage too, forcing them back. And also it's a good way to play into a little bit of a cycle of pushing them back with damage and then having them try to close the distance on us, using an opportunity attack on them. Then when they do damage us, the cycle repeats itself of pushing them back. And it's kind of like their own little self-sabotage too, and it's a good and interesting way to roleplay as a bodyguard or Black Guard of Naggarond and bodyguard of the Witch King. Alright friends, when it comes to the gear and weapon choices here, this is my personal playstyle, and also in terms of really keeping it in line with what I think the Black Guard of Naggarond would look like. If you have any differences of opinion in terms of any of my individual choices, please let me know in the comments on ways that you would choose different armors or weapons, or essentially in terms of either roleplay or improving the character build overall. But starting with the headpiece, I like the Helldusk helmet with Infernal Sight. We can see magical and ordinary darkness up to a range of 12 meters, can't be blinded, magical durability. We have a +2 bonus to saving throws against spells, leaning into the anti-magic, and also increased ward save for us for all of the Warhammer players watching. And attackers can't land critical hits on us too, adding to our tankiness potential. Plus also we gain the Immolating Gaze ability, 2d16 fire damage, and frightening our target as well. Really, again, playing into the roleplay of a sadistic dark elf on the battlefield. As for the cape, I like a simple Cloak of Protection, adds a respectable +1 to armor class and saving throw, and our AC overall with everything equipped is a very strong 18. The main armor piece here being gilded half-plate armor. Some of the gear and equipment I get from the extra gear and equipment mod, with superior plate, 2 less piercing damage, +1 bonus to initiative rolls as an ambusher, Grievous Retribution. When an enemy damages the wearer gains Wrath for 2 turns, adrenaline coursing through our veins, and gaining a +1 bonus to damage with our halberd. Adamantine Backlash is going to be really useful too. When a melee attack hits us, attackers are sent reeling and have a -1 penalty to attack rolls for their turn. Adventurer's Boots from Extra Gear, very useful with Nightwalker, can't be enwebbed, entangled, or ensnared, and can't slip on grease or ice, owing to some added mobility and helping us stay on our toes literally on the battlefield. Misty Step is also going to be useful with the bonus action too, and a very respectable +2 to our acrobatics. Amulet of Ball is really going to pair well with our Halberd of Vigilance too, causing bleeding upon targets that have maximum health, and essentially this is going to really stack up with damage as well. It's going to be useful for damage over time too. Ring of Protection, adding another +1 to armor class and our saving throws, and Ring of Regeneration. Beginning of our turn, Ring activates and heals us 1 to 4 hit points. And while it's just 1 to 4 hit points, I know I have been using Ring of Regeneration in a lot of my character builds, especially those who are frontline fighters and are more on the tanky side. but the 1-4 hit points can really stack up with some of our other life draining and health draining abilities. As for our weapon of choice here, this Halberd of Vigilance will deal 7 to 19 damage overall, 1d10 plus 5 slashing, and 1d4 force damage. Gain a +1 bonus on initiative rolls and an advantage on perception ability checks. Adroit reflexes: when you make an attack roll as a reaction, you make it with advantage. So again, with our attack rolls as reactions and enemies coming into our zone of attack, or also pushing back enemies, like I mentioned with Gift of the Gem Dragon, advantage and a weapon enchantment of +2. Overall, just making us essentially a one Black Guard of Naggarond doom stack. Alright friends, that has been my character showcase of the Oath of Treachery Paladin from Blue Joe, and also my showcase and take on the Black Guard of Naggarond. Let me know, Warhammer and D&D friends, if you like my choices in terms of leveling or character build, or things that you would choose differently in terms of improving the stats and character overall, or keeping in line with roleplay too. And also for all the new and returning viewers, thank you so much for taking the time and opportunity to watch this whole way through if you have. And also for those interested in more adventures in Elder Scrolls, D&D, and Warhammer videos, I'd love to have you join us on those separate adventures, friends. And remember to hit the like, subscribe, and bell icon notifications, and I'll save you a seat at the table for the next adventure. Take care and farewell, friends.